Big news in Hearthstone with the 17.0 update, and it's a great time to come back to Hearthstone or start Hearthstone, because if you have not logged in between November 18th, 2019 and March 17th, 2020, then you're gonna get a free deck. And the decks are really good. So in this video, we're gonna cover all these new decks, and I'm gonna talk about which one you should grab. And if you wanna save yourself a few minutes, the answer is Rogue or Mage, by the way. Don't you hate those videos, which is like, we'll tell you what the best deck is. Watch until the end to find out. But I got you. The Madman! When you get this new player reward or the returning player reward, you're going to go through a quest line. At the end of that quest line, you're gonna get the choice of a deck. And this is a really important choice because the deck choice will strongly incline you towards that deck at the beginning, because all of these decks are really strong, like way past what a typical new player would usually have. I think all 9 of these decks are really well built. However, 2 of them are standout good, 6 of them are going to still be pretty good, and 3 of them, even though they're a well-built deck using the deck mechanics, they are perhaps a little bit weaker. The Warrior deck is a drop the Inkard deck. It's a Pirate Warrior deck. It's the most aggressive out of all 9 of these, so it is a decent choice for the person who really wants to be fast and hit the face. The main problem with this deck is that of aggressive decks, there are quite a number which are better than Pirate Warrior. Face Hunter is better. I suspect Face Demon Hunter will probably be better. This deck mainly relies on Inkar, which was nerfed near the beginning of this expansion, to high roll your way through very aggressive pirates. So again, if you enjoy hitting your opponent's face, decent choice, but there perhaps are better decks to do such a thing. Another one of the weaker choices is the Galakrond Shaman. Galakrond Shaman got a lot of nerfs after its initial overwhelming success at the beginning of the expansion. On top of that, this particular deck list tries to have a little bit of flavor with the Fist of Raden and Eye of the Storm, which is just pure meme. This is probably one of the weaker versions of Galakrond decks that you could build. And Galakrond Shaman already is considered fairly weak. And then the third one that I consider a little bit weaker would be the pure Paladin deck. This is a deck that features 30 Paladin cards in order to take advantage of the strength of Lightforged Crusader and Lightforged Zealot. It's a pretty good idea, and pure Paladin honestly isn't that bad. Might actually be a little bit better with the Librams from the next expansion, but it's a little bit uncertain how good the Librams will be. If you really like playing Paladin, then this might be a decent choice. But if you don't like playing Paladin, then these are 30 cards that you won't be using in the future. So if you're picking this one, you better really like playing Paladin. And hey, for those of you who do like playing Paladin, just pick it. In fact, overall, if you really like playing a certain class, you should pick that deck. It's like, I'm just slightly discouraging you from picking Paladin and Shaman and Warrior, but if you want to, it's not a terrible choice, go for it. For Druid, it's the Treant deck, and now that I have this, I'm reminded that all of these decks, by the way, are standard proof, which means these cards all feature cards from the last 3 expansions, nothing further back, which means none of these cards for any of these 9 decks will rotate out. What reminded me of that is this deck doesn't have Mulch Muncher in it, which is one of the major Treant synergy cards. But overall, this is a very strong token Druid deck. The goal is to play a bunch of tokens out and then buff them with the wide board buff of Power of the Wild, Blessing of the Ancients, Savage Roar, and Soul of the Forest, which is strangely missing here, but you should put in Soul of the Forest into this deck. It's just a common too. But yes, really strong deck. I think Token Druid is solid tier 2, even now. And certainly past the expansion, this deck list looks solid. You can pick Quest Hunter too. Quest Hunter is a nice solid tier 2 deck right now. It focuses around the quest of Unseal the Vault. This always begins in your opening hand, which means you're always on the goal of summoning 20 minions and then getting your Pharaoh's War Mask. You run a bunch of minions, you press your hero power each turn. Very solid deck. This Priest deck is great for people who love playing a control deck. I think this is the controlliest out of all 9 of the starter decks. And it is a very solid Res Priest entry. Looking at this list, it doesn't actually lose that much. You still obviously have Mass Resurrection, which is the idea of the deck. You want to control the board and then play your really big cards, and then use Mass Resurrection to summon 3 of your really big cards. This deck actually got a little bit stronger, by the way, because Shadow Word Death and Holy Smite and Holy Nova all have gotten buffs. So if you like controlling the board and just answering everything the opponent does and then getting an overwhelming play of Mass Resurrection, this is the deck for you. And then there's Galakrond Warlock. This particular Galakrond Warlock is a Zoo variant. And the Zoo variant is a solid way to play the deck as well, but it's not too hard to retool this deck with the Galakrond and the Kronks and all the Galakrond cards included by default into the possibly better version, the control hand block version. But certainly a Zoo deck is really good for any beginner. It really teaches you the basics of board control and just using your minions efficiently and playing on a curve each turn and card advantage, what with your Warlock hero power tapping each turn. It's got a strong baseline idea too of getting a bunch of lackeys and then playing Dark Pharaoh Tekon, and then your lackeys are 4/4s. So basically this particular Zoo package has the lackey package in it as well as the Galakrond package, and it's solid. And now onto the top 2. If I were to personally recommend which decks you should choose when you get your free deck, I would recommend one of these 2. But again, like my base recommendation, go with the class that you love playing first. But if you're mostly neutral and you want a slight nudge towards one of these 2 directions, then Mage or Rogue is the way to go. So let's start with Rogue. Right now, in Constructed, Galakrond Rogue is considered tier 1. It is the most played deck out there, and this particular list gives you almost every single card you want in that deck. And by the way, this again does look like it's going to be a really strong deck post-rotation because it doesn't lose much. I mean, all of these cards are still there. You probably want to swap out the Shadow Steps, which you don't need anymore now that this deck doesn't have Leroy, perhaps. And you definitely want to put in one of the stronger cards, Flick Skyshift, into the deck. But other than that, this baseline is really, really strong. It's just a lean, mean, competitive machine. I have no doubts that this would be a trivial free-to-play to Legend, which is why I am probably not going to do it. But if I were to start a new account, I would just pick Galakrond's Guile as my deck. I would probably beeline towards crafting Flick Skyshift, and then, you know, easy Legend. If you play the deck correctly, no doubt you can get there. And for those who want a bit more of a fun choice and more flexibility, highly recommend the Rino Mage deck, because the Rino Mage deck has 3 of the really key Highlander cards. It's got Zephyrus, which you're going to want to put into any Highlander deck. It's got Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, which you're going to want to put into any Highlander deck. And these are the neutral cards, which means any deck you create that just has 1 copy of each card in your deck, you can just put in Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and Zephyrus into it, and those will turn your pile of trash into treasure. If you watch me a lot, you know that I love putting Zephyrus and Dragon Queen Alexstrasza into any deck. Like, turn it into Highlander, it can't be that bad because those 2 cards are so strong it'll carry the whole deck. This deck also comes with Rino, which is a really strong Highlander card for Mage. I think Highlander Mage will still be strong come rotation, but perhaps the most important thing is I think out of all the decks, this gets you Zephyrus and Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, which you will want to put into any other class which is singleton, and they're a big draw towards making any deck into a singleton deck. So there has never been a better time to get back into Hearthstone. New players and returning players, get your opening deck, get caught right back up into the meta, and start the new expansion strong.